As some of you might know, my December vinyl haul is dedicated to all of the non-metal vinyl purchases I make in the year, such being 2021. Got 8 records here total to talk about and show you. Some pretty good stuff. So if you're interested in what I listen to that isn't necessarily metal, and you want to see some vinyl, then here you go. First up is the 21st studio album for electronic music pioneer Gary Numan, or 23rd album if you count the Tubeway Army albums, which of course I do. This is Intruder, released in 2021 by BMG. So a lot of people remember Gary Numan in the late 70s and the early 80s, particularly with his hit Cars off the Pleasure Principle. Great album. In fact, that was my very first Gary Numan album. I bought it when I was about 13 years old back in 1981. Became a fan more or less off and on ever since. And he has had some musical changes in those time periods. In the 80s, he went on a little bit more of a dance thing, and there was more of the industrial thing that happened in the 90s with his music because he was watching what Trent Reznor was doing, and he liked that a whole lot. Interestingly enough, Trent Reznor, also a fan of Gary Numan. There's a bit of a mutual love for each other there. Gary did play out with Nine Inch Nails a little bit, so they've kind of influenced each other. And that's obvious, too, in albums like Sacrifice and on in the 90s and the 2000s. You can hear that. But this album's a little bit more interesting in such a respect that it's slower, it's moodier, it's a little more sentimental. I think this is a very much older Gary Numan. He's approaching the elderly age. I think he's about 62, 63 now. So you can call it a more mature Gary Numan if you want. But yeah, definitely slower and moodier. Kind of interesting. I'll also show you there is a gatefold here. Another picture of Gary. And of course the back as well. There's also a little bit of a Middle Eastern influence in some of the music. It's not overt, it's not all over the place, but it is in there. So it's kind of an interesting layer to the music that's going on here. Vinyl variant for this one is 2LP black. Custom labels that match the jacket. Also comes with 2 inner sleeves. Minimalist photography and art here. Gary got some lyrics. And of course, second one, very much like the first, also with lyrics and such. Do have some favorites, of course. Is This World Not Enough? It's a pretty great song. I love I Am Screaming. And of course, When You Fall. Also music videos for this one for the title track, as well as Saints and Liars. One thing I should mention about this record is a little bit samey at times. The tracks all have kind of a consistent pace. Would have liked some of his more aggressive style of music in there to mix things up a bit, stuff he's done on previous records. But again, this is the older, more mature Gary Numan. I guess that's what we're getting here. Overall, I really dig this album. I think I have to be more in a very specific mood to hear it. Still good. I do like previous albums a little bit more, though. Next up is the 2020 reissue of the original 1969 debut album from American occult rock band Coven. This is Witchcraft Destroys Minds and Reaps Souls, released by Real Gone Music. So probably one of the better ways to describe the music on this is the bit of kind of a Jefferson Airplane thing going on, maybe an occult version of Jefferson Airplane, maybe a little bit of early Fleetwood Mac. It's very much a product of its time. It does have a cool gatefold. It's kind of a dual gatefold. You've got the picture here, some credits, but it also has another page, which goes to the lyrics. Very cool. Vinyl variant for this one is Blue and Orange Swirl, what they're calling Fire and Brimstone. Sure, why not? They say it's limited edition, but there are no real numbers available on that, so, yeah, take it as you will. Got some favorites, of course. Covenant Charing Cross is a great song. Wicked Woman is pretty decent. And we do love the closing track, Satanic Mass, which is a 13-minute track, largely spoken word. It's a ritual performance, much like it sounds. It's clearly inspired by the record of the same name that came out a year earlier that the Church of Satan put out, which is also spoken word ritual. In fact, some of the dialogue is lifted from that record, which is in turn from the Satanic Bible from Anton LaVey, blah, blah, blah. Fun fact, related to a metal band, Merciful Fate did pull some lyrics from Satanic Mass for their track The Oath. In fact, quite a bit of The Oath is pulled from lyrics to Satanic Mass from this album, so pretty interesting. So the record is a bit hippie, it's a bit a product of its time. I think musically it fits somewhere between Charles Manson and Iron Butterfly. You could pair this up with those if you wanted to, but a little bit of a novelty at this point, musically speaking. I'll throw it on every once in a while, especially for Satanic Mass, which is pretty fun, but yeah, it's all right. Next is the third studio album from Canadian rock band Sumo Cyco. This is Initiation, released in 2021 by Napalm Records. So Wikipedia is describing this band as System of a Down meets Rob Zombie meets No Doubt, which is a pretty idiotic description of this band. I don't hear any System of a Down. If we're talking about Rob Zombie, maybe some of their aesthetic. They make their own music videos, which is pretty interesting, so you can see some of that. And the No Doubt is probably coming from the fact that Sky's vocals occasionally visit a Gwen Stefani kind of sound. I don't think the music is so much that, though. She also visits a little bit of Britney and tracks like Vertigo. But she usually does the clean vocals intermixed with some almost hardcore vocals. So there's a little bit of that highly aggressive vocal thing going on, which I really like, especially from her. Also, as you can tell, she's a little easy on the eyes as well. She's got some pipes, I gotta say. She's definitely worth hearing. Track listing here on the back as well. So as best as I could describe it, there's some pop punk going on. There's some electronic influences here. Definitely an alt metal thing going on at times. It does get a little bit rappy at the rare occasion. I'm not so put off by that, which is pretty interesting because usually when I hear that on any record, I immediately shut off and don't want to hear it. But for some reason, this band sells me on it a little bit. So I think that's kind of cool. Good job, band. The vinyl variant for this one is orange. Custom labels on both sides. There was also a version in purple, yellow, and pink. It was limited edition. Came with a 7-inch record that had 2 additional tracks on it. Didn't get that one. I think that was limited to 300 copies. By the way, lyrics, both sides here. As for favorites, definitely Love You Wrong. The opening track's pretty great. Bystander, which is one of the singles. Really dig this Dance is Doomed, as well as No Surrender. No Surrender is my favorite song. If you check out any track, check out that one first. There's also a bonus track here, Awakened. It's on all the physical formats. It's not on the regular digital version of this album, but it is on a deluxe digital version of this album, which is totally confusing, but there you go. Of course, I should mention music videos too. They have 4 off this album, 1 for Bystander, 1 for Vertigo, 1 for Bad News, and 1 for No Surrender. The music videos are actually pretty cool. They make them themselves, and you would swear by watching them that there was some professional video production house that makes them. Sky and her boyfriend actually make them in their attic with full props and digital effects and everything. When you watch them, think of that. 2 people made these videos, and they're the band members. So hats off to them. As a video guy, I'm kind of geek out on that stuff a little bit. Pretty cool. Also interesting that the videos, songs are all front-loaded on the A side. I think they might have had more confidence in those tracks, or the label had more confidence in them. There is some good stuff on the B side, too. Again, I mentioned this Dance is Doomed. I think it's one of the best songs on the album, next to my favorite, which, of course, is No Surrender. So definitely not a record for everybody, and I think there are a lot of metal fans who might balk at this because it's not heavy or extreme enough for them, but it's getting a lot of spins with me. I kind of dig it. Check it out. Next up is the 2015 EP for Orgy. This is Talk Sick, released by D1. D1 is a music label fronted by the vocalist for this band, Jay Gordon. Jay Gordon's pretty much the consistent member of this band throughout the decades. In case you don't remember, Orgy did come out back in the late 90s. They put an album out called Candy Ass. They got a couple hits off of that. Blue Monday was a cover tune from New Order, as well as Stitches. 2000, they released Vapor Transmission, which I feel is their strongest album. There was some great songs on that, especially Fiction, She Dreams in Digital. A great video for that one, too. You should check it out. Then after that, they did Punk Static Paranoia, which was okay, and then they kind of fell apart and weren't around for quite a while. And then Jay Gordon resuscitated the band and had a bit of a hard time trying to get music out for a number of years. It was kind of strange. This EP finally came out after I think there were a couple singles that were released years before it, and all of that. Not a full album. It's 7 songs. It's bigger than an EP, smaller than an LP, and there was promise of another full-length album, or at least another EP after this, but we haven't seen that. So there's a bit of drama and complicatedness in the Orgy story, but still dig this band quite a bit. The vinyl variant for this one is a fairly interesting shade of blue. I kind of dig it. It's got a little bit of subtle marbling in it, but otherwise pretty interesting. It does remind me of the Tron Legacy soundtrack. There was a reissue for Record Store Day a couple years back that was very much the exact same color. It is now going for $150 at Discogs for some insane reason. Won't get into that. Anyways, favorites on this, I love Spells, as well as Wide Awake and Dead. Those are also the music video tracks. You should check both of those out. The only really weak track on here is Monster in Me. It's the EP closer. It's not awful, but it's not great. And I think if you took it off, it'd be a much better EP. You'd still have 6 songs, which is more of an EP. So, yeah, that's how I feel about it. So given some of the poppy alt-metal bands that came out in the late 90s and the early aughts, I really feel Orgy was at the top of their game. It's kind of sad they fell away for a time. Speaking of which, I think this band would actually pair well with Sumo Cyco. I think they should go out and tour together. I think that it's a bill that would make sense. Anyways, I know this album isn't Vapor Transmission, which is still my very favorite. It isn't as industrial. It isn't as metal. It does get a little dancey at times. It still has its moments. It still sounds like Orgy to a great degree. I do like this album a bit. I think it is a good step in a good direction overall, and I'd like to see where they go from here. So, yeah, check it out. Next up is a 2021 reissue of the 3rd studio album from alt-rock band Garbage. This is Beautiful Garbage, released by BMG. So for those who forgot about this band or weren't around for them, Garbage was an alt-rock band that came out of the 90s. They had elements of girl groups, electronica, pop, new wave, a bunch of other styles going on in the music. Pretty cool stuff. People might also remember this band from their vocalist, Shirley Manson. Amazing, amazing vocals, which are wonderfully contrasted by her thick Scottish speaking voice. A lot of American media didn't really understand her accent very well. I kind of like that contrast, because you have this beautiful voice on one end and this kind of gruff Scottish voice talking in interviews on the other half of it. You almost don't believe that person is singing on this album or others, but I kind of dig that. Gatefold, also telling you the title of the album in case you forget it, and tracks on the back. Vinyl variant for this one is 140 gram 2LP white. Matching labels, of course. This was remastered. This is a 20th anniversary release, too, I should mention that. It was remastered from the original tapes. Does sound pretty good. Some favorites on this album, of course, for me. I love Shut Your Mouth. I love Cup of Coffee. I love Untouchables. And Cherry Lips Go Baby Go. It's probably one of my favorite songs on the album. There are music videos, 20-year-old music videos, in case you didn't know. There's one for Shut Your Mouth, there's one for Androgyny, there's one for Cherry Lips Go Baby Go, and there's also one for, let's see where it is, Breaking Up the Girl. That's it. That was another single off the album. Of course, also there are some inner sleeves. We've got full lyrics here, as well as a nice picture of the band. LP2's inner sleeve, credits, little picture of the band, flip it over, big color picture of the band. So I bought this edition of the album after not hearing the album for a couple decades, actually. I bought on the strength of a few songs that I really liked a lot, which I just mentioned, and then listened to the rest of the album. I'm like, wow, this is really good and holds up in a lot of ways. So I'm spitting this once again quite a bit. Definitely good stuff. Next is a 2021 debut from Paul Stanley's Soul Station. This is Now and Then, released by Yumi. Paul Stanley, of course, rhythm guitarist and lead vocalist for Kiss. There he is. Also, Eric Singer, drummer for Kiss, is here. The rest of the band, not so much Kiss. In fact, this sounds nothing like a Kiss album. It sounds nothing like either of Paul Stanley's solo albums. This is a soul record. Philly soul, to be a little more precise. There are also some shades of Motown. And although he doesn't talk about this in interviews, I hear a slight disco flavor in some of the tracks. Brings these tracks a little more out of the 60s, a little more into the 70s. I don't know if he was listening to some Earth, Wind, and Fire or whatnot, but I definitely hear a little bit in there as well. Also comes in a gatefold jacket, pictures of the band, some credits, as well as a small essay from Paul talking about his Philly soul influence, his early days of listening to music, not just rock music. Pretty interesting. Also got a nice little logo and track listings for you there. So the album is basically 2/3 cover songs and 1/3 originals. I would say of the cover songs, I definitely dig Could It Be I'm Falling in Love, as well as Ooh Baby Baby. And as far as the originals, I really dig I Do, as well as Whenever You're Ready, I'm Here. There are music videos as well, one for IOI and one for Ooh Child. So check those both out if you're interested. Of course, I'm also betting you want to see the vinyl. Of course. This one comes in purple, of course. Kiss fans know that purple is Paul's color. Each member of Kiss has one. Gene has red, Peter has green, Ace has blue. So, little reference to the fans there. Also, an insert with track listings, some pictures, as well as a big one of Paul. And he's in purple. There you go. So Paul's voice on this is decent to very good, I would say. A lot of fans of Kiss have been a little bit down on Paul. His vocals in that band have been deteriorating, to put it mildly. But I think this music puts him in a different register, which makes him sound a lot better. I think he should remain in this register, to be brutally honest. Philly Soul kind of works for Paul. And it sounds really great. Again, this is not a Kiss record. Don't expect a Kiss record. But it is a classy little disc. And if you want to hear some Philly Soul and you want to hear Paul Stanley doing it, there's your record. Pretty decent. Check it out. And if we're going to talk about Paul Stanley, why not talk about Kiss? This is the 2021 reissue of their fourth studio album entitled Destroyer. This is the 45th anniversary edition, released by Universal Music Group. So before we get to the vinyl, I want to talk about the insert and the gatefold and all that stuff. Let's start with that gatefold first. Great picture. The lyrics here are to King of the Nighttime World, which is kind of strange. It is a cover song, by the way. A lot of people don't know that. I might have gone with Shout It Out Loud or one of their bigger songs. I don't know why specifically that song, but all right. There's a bunch of extras in here as well, as I mentioned. The inner sleeve is a pretty good reproduction of the original one. It did have the lyrics to Detroit Rock City here, as well as the Kiss Army logo and Shout Out Loud. This is the top loader version. It was also a side loader version in other editions. Also have another insert, another inner sleeve that is. Cool pictures of the band, as well as a whole bunch of Kiss concert tickets. I really like what they did with this. I think the art design is pretty great. Some of the inclusion stuff is decent, including this little booklet here. The cover is, looks like recording notes, production notes, what have you right there. And Story of Destroyer is in here. Lots of pictures of the band. The band talks about stuff. Bob Ezrin, the producer, talks about stuff involving the making of the album. Some great pictures. Bill Coyne, other notable people in the Kiss camp. Great live shots from the Destroyer tour. Different versions of the album. Kiss Resurrected is there. The original artwork by Ken Kelly. Also some magazine appearances. More great pictures. Some of the singles that came off this album from all the different countries. More pics, some credits, and production notes. As for the vinyl, the album itself is on this bright, almost banana yellow. They did something strange. It's almost a copper version of the Casablanca blue labels. Might have preferred the original blue labels. I don't know, but there's that. Record 2, which we'll discuss shortly, has some bonus material on it, is in red. Color choices are a little curious. I think the red is more or less okay. I might have gone a little bit maybe with gold or sort of an orange to gold fade or something like that to match the colors going on in the logo a little bit more, but maybe that's being picky. I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you think it's picky or not. As for favorites on this edition, I'm not going to go through the standard album tracks. Everyone knows Detroit Rock City and God of Thunder and Shout It Out Loud. They're great songs. I want to talk about some of the bonus material on here. I should mention that there are a few tracks from Paul Stanley's demos for this album, as well as a few tracks from Gene Simmons' demos, as well as some rarities, some outtake tracks, some alternate mix tracks from Destroyer. Starting with Paul Stanley's demo, I really love the God of Thunder and Rock and Roll, his version of God of Thunder. It's an early version. It's Paul Stanley singing. Slightly different lyrics, actually mostly very different lyrics. Drums are actually done by J.R. Smalling, which is interesting. J.R. Smalling was their road manager in the 1970s. He's the guy you hear in the live shows back then saying, "You wanted the best, you got the best, the hottest band in the world, Kiss." That's J.R. Smalling. Interesting. It's almost like a weird disco beat that he's doing in the song. It kind of works. It's a very Paul Stanley song, the version here. Later what happened, of course, is producer Bob Ezrin took the song away from Paul, gave it to Gene instead, and they changed it heavily, lyrically, musically, etc. And that's the version you know on this album. But it's interesting to hear the early version. Speaking of early versions, I also dig on the Paul Stanley demo, the early version of Detroit Rock City. It's more raw. It's pretty interesting. Again, I like hearing those early mixes to see where the song went from beginning to end. So pretty cool. On the rarities, I definitely dig the acoustic mix of Beth. 100% not sure, because what's going on in this version is that it has piano and acoustic guitar, and I would rather heard it without the piano. Sort of like the version that's on Kiss Beats of the Phantom of the Park. You know, you get a snippet of an acoustic version of that song in that movie. I would have preferred a full version of it on a studio LP as a rare track if they had it. But maybe they didn't. Who knows? So we get this version. I'm okay with it. There's a lot of other good stuff on here. Shout Out Loud is a single edit. King of the Nighttime World has a rehearsal instrumental. Another instrumental for Detroit Rock City. There's an early version of Flaming Youth. There's an alternate mix of Shout It Out Loud. Gene Simmons does a few tracks on his demos. I Don't Want No Romance, Rock and Rolls Royce, and Star. And the other Paul Stanley demo track is Love Is Alright. Decent stuff. Again, it's fun to hear the history. So admittedly, this is my 5th edition of Destroyer on vinyl in my collection. I have the original US version on the blue label. I have the original UK version on the blue label. I have Destroyer Resurrected. I've got the 77 reissue on Filmworks. And now I have this. So I don't believe I have a problem. Maybe I do. I don't know. But had to have this, especially for the rare tracks. So definitely recommended. Next is a split album of sorts, a very reflecty split album between the Foo Fighters and their disco alter egos, the Dee Gees. This is Hail Satin, released in 2021 by Roswell Records. So this record is a Record Store Day exclusive, came out obviously in 2021, limited to 12,000 copies. There's the Foo Fighters side, if you can make out the picture. It's kind of hard to see. Vinyl is black, standard good old black, as it would be in the 1970s. Speaking of that era, you can see the picture of the Dee Gees in full 70s disco regalia. Pretty amazing. Kind of dig the sense of humor here. We'll talk a little bit about that later. There are the track listings here. You got You Should Be Dancing, Night Fever, Tragedy, Shadow Dancing, and More Than a Woman on the Dee Gees side. Obviously, those are mostly Bee Gees songs, except for Shadow Dancing, which is an Andy Gibb song. Don't know why I really know that. The Foo Fighters, it is live, but it's live in studio. The tracks are Making a Fire, Shame Shame, Waiting on a War, No Son of Mine, and Cloud Spotter. Those are all modern songs from them. I think they're from their most recent studio LP. So there's that. Some favorite tracks on this one. I dig You Should Be Dancing, as well as Tragedy, especially Tragedy. I would probably check that song out first. There are music videos, 2 of them, one for You Should Be Dancing and one for Shadow Dancing. And incidentally, if you were wondering about this cover, they are calling this Dazzling Rainbow Mylar. I should say that some of this, at least conceptually, is reminding me of the band Tragedy. Some of you might know they do heavy metal versions of disco songs, especially Bee Gees songs, but they do other artists as well. I think the humor in that band is a lot more overt. It's a lot more subtle in this album. Maybe I would have liked some more of the humor here as a result of that. I'm not sure, but I do think of that band when I think of what's going on here, at least a little bit. Admittedly, I wasn't so interested in the Foo Fighters side of this record, the live and studio tracks, although I am a bit of a fan of their singles from way back. I dug some of that stuff quite a bit. Maybe I'm just not into the modern stuff as much. Maybe I just don't have as much of a connection to it. I don't know. But the Dee Gees material was definitely the draw here. It's the gimmick. I fell for it. There it is. So it's a fun little record. It's a novelty record, admittedly, but again, fun. Check it out. And there's my non-metal vinyl haul for 2021. Of course, next month, such being January 2022, we'll go back to 11 months of metal. As some of you like, you should let me know in the comments if you like the non-metal releases sometimes. Some of you do, some of you don't. Let me know in the comments. Let me know what you thought. Let me know what you thought about some of these records. Maybe you own some of them. So yeah, in the comments. Let me know. Of course, some of you metal fans already know next week I'll be doing my top 10 metal albums of 2021 video. You should definitely check back in for that. Always a good time. And as for you who just checked in, maybe you're not familiar with my channel, my name is Matt. This is the Accusation Network. I do metal vinyl collecting videos each and every week. Check out those playlists, check out my shows. Think you'll find something that you might like. You never know. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.